for oh, you already got the thing started?
Yeah. What's up, guys? I'm here with Trent. How you doing, man?
Hey, doing good. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. So it's football season. It's here. How you feeling?
I believe it should be a pretty good season. Of course, Ole Miss has Jackson Dart back again this year. Of course, Ole Miss has some pretty good wide receivers, has a couple pretty good running backs. The offensive line still has a couple question marks at this time. The defense should be pretty good. I think this is going to be one of the best defenses Ole Miss has had in quite a while. Our defensive line should be a top 5 or top 10 in the country. Linebacker group should be pretty good. I think our secondary group is not getting enough love than what they should be getting. But I think our secondary should be pretty good as well, too. But you look at the schedule for Ole Miss, I mean, I think this is a pretty good schedule. Ole Miss has a couple pretty easy teams the first couple of weeks. And then you look at the other conference games, you look at the home games, you look at the away games. The biggest question marks to me at this time, just to be honest with you, Kobe, I would probably say at LSU is going to be kind of a tough one. Of course, playing Georgia is going to be a tough one too. Oklahoma is kind of an interesting one as well too. I know Oklahoma is a team. They'll have a new quarterback this year. They have a couple pretty good players returning back, but they also lost a couple good players as well too. LSU is also kind of an interesting team. Of course, they have a new quarterback as well too. They had two wide receivers go first round. Defense last year kind of struggled. So LSU will be kind of an interesting game. It will be a night game this year, and of course, Kobe, of course, LSU playing at LSU at night is not easy at all. So
It's not.
that game is going to be tough. It could be a pretty close matchup. And then, of course, Georgia. We all know Georgia has been a very good team the last couple of years. Of course, national champions a couple of years ago. Of course, they have Carson Beck back again this year. They have Dominique Lovick, wide receiver. Other offensive weapons as well too back again this year. Some good transfers coming in. They have a very elite defense. But I mean, you look at this Ole Miss team and trying to predict the schedule. I think this is a team who goes 9-3 at the worst. But honestly, I'm kind of thinking 10-2, maybe 11-1. Of course, the goal is hopefully Ole Miss can go to the playoffs, and if we can win it all, would be pretty nice. But
Yeah.
to be honest, I'm kind of expecting probably 10-2.
Yeah. Yeah. If you look at Ole Miss, they returning Jackson Dart. He's been outstanding at Ole Miss. How do you think he'll do this season?
I think he's in for a special season. I don't see him winning the Heisman. Of course, I hope he does, but
Yeah.
I feel like he's on me just a little short. I mean, I do believe he'll have a special season. I do believe he'll finish top 10 for sure in the Heisman voting. But I mean, you look at his Ole Miss offense. I mean, he has so many weapons to throw to. Of course, you got Trey Harris, you got Juice Wells, you got Jordan Watkins. Of course, Ole Miss has some good running backs as well too. But I mean, Dart's a elite thrower, very good runner as well too. Very good quarterback. So I do believe he'll be up there very high in the Heisman voting, and I do believe he's in for a special season.
Yeah. If you look at the defensive line, um, I think the defensive line could be a special group this year.
Oh, I agree with you. I really do. I mean, one thing Ole Miss is attacked hard this all season is the defensive line. And Ole Miss was looking for guys who are veteran players. Ole Miss was looking for guys who were juniors and seniors, and Ole Miss was looking for guys who have played at a high level, if that was the SEC or ACC or like a big time conference. Those are the type of players Ole Miss is looking for. But this Ole Miss defensive line, Jared Ivey is back again this year. Of course, you have Princely transferring in from Florida. Pegues has been at Ole Miss for a couple of years. He's back again this year. I mean, you have Walter Nolan is actually from Mississippi, but went to Texas A&M. out of high school, but now he's here at Ole Miss. That's kind of your four guys who are probably starting this year for Ole Miss. And then even as far as the backups, even the backups are pretty good as well too. Looking like Chris Hardy, he's a transfer from Jacksonville State, looking like he'll be a backup for Ole Miss this year, but he's another senior, another veteran player, another very good defensive end. Southern Perkins is kind of an interesting player for Ole Miss this year. We have learned he'll play some defensive line, and we've also learned he'll play some linebacker for Ole Miss this year as well too. But he's a very talented player. He'll be used in many different ways at Ole Miss this year for sure. A couple more guys you can mention as well too on the defensive line. Of course, Akilo Stone back again this year at Xavier Harris. I know he's gotten in some trouble recently. Possibility he may be suspended for a couple of games. We'll have to see about that. Of course, a couple of pretty good freshmen coming as well too. But this defensive line is pretty good. The linebacker room is pretty good. Even the secondary room is also pretty good as well too.
Yeah. And you mentioned Lane Kiffin brought in his brother from how could he help Ole Miss this year?
That's a good question. So, yeah, his brother is Chris Kiffin. Now, Chris Kiffin's a guy who has been at Ole Miss a couple of times in the past. Ole Miss fans already know who he is. The first time he was at Ole Miss, he was a grad assistant for a year. He came back in 2012 as a defensive line coach, and he was also a recruiting coordinator as well too. He was back for 4 or 5 years, and now he's back again here in 2024. But Chris Kiffin's a guy who's been coaching football for many years. He's a guy who's been coaching for over 20 plus years. Of course, I'm sure you know Kobe. Of course, their dad was Monty Kiffin. Of course, Monty was a coach in college and the pros for a while as well too. Mm-hmm. He's learned a lot from Wayne. He's learned a lot from his dad Monty. He's a guy who was in college for a while, but also Chris was a guy who was with the Cleveland Browns for a minute. There for a couple of years. He's with the Houston Texans for a year as well too. Very smart guy, but most out of his 20 plus years coaching, he's mainly been a defensive line coach. That's kind of his specialty, and I do believe that's probably how he'll probably help Ole Miss the most this year. Is probably the defensive line. But also in the past, he was a recruiting coordinator. I thought he did a pretty good job recruiting. For Ole Miss as well too. Now, of course, he's an analyst this year. He's not going to be recruiting anymore. But I thought this was a big time hire for Ole Miss. And I don't know if you saw the video I made yesterday or not about Chris Kiffin, but I kind of mentioned this toward the end of the video, and I like what Ole Miss has done. So, of course, Ole Miss has a couple coaches back again this year, a couple of new coaches as well too, but the way I kind of explained it in the video was Coach Joyner. He's our defensive line coach. I was pretty much saying my Coach Joyner and Chris Kiffin will be kind of your two main coaches, probably focusing on the defensive line this year. And then as far as the linebackers coaches, I do believe actually Zach Arnett, who is now here at Ole Miss, I do believe Arnett will be one of the guys who will probably focus on linebackers the most. And of course, I mean, you have to give credit where credit's due. I mean, Zach Arnett did a very good job at Mississippi State as a defensive coordinator and also linebackers coach as well too. But I do believe Zach Arnett will be a big time help with our linebacker group this year for sure. Of course, Pete Golden will also help out with the linebackers some as well too. Yeah. And then as far as the secondary, our main coaches as far as the secondary would probably be of course, Pete Gordon's going to be one of them. Coach Brown, he's a new coach for Ole Miss this year. And then also Coach Neighbors, he's a safeties coach who will also help the Ole Miss secondary this year as well too.
Yeah, if you look at the running back group, there's a lot of running backs that they can use. How do you think they'll use them? Because there's a bunch of them.
That's a good question. Now, of course, the last couple of years, Quinshawn Junkins has been He's been our main running back the last couple of years. He's the guy who's got the majority of the carries. Last year he was a guy who had 270 plus carries, I believe. And then the next guy behind him, I think, was Bentley. Bentley had like 90, 95 carries, might have been 100 carries. But the last couple of years, it's been obvious who has got the majority of the carries. It was kind of obvious who got the majority of the yards. And even Ole Miss fans know who got most of the touchdowns as well, too. But this year, I do believe it will be probably more of like a balanced running back room. I do believe you will see Coach Kevin Smith he's going to kind of keep the guys more fresh this year, in my opinion. I do believe probably a good chance as well, too. You won't see any running back at Ole Miss this year have 250 plus carries. Once again, I think it's going to be kind of even. I think there's a couple of running backs at Ole Miss who could have 125 or 150 carries this year, but I don't think any running back at Ole Miss will have 250 carries this year.
Yeah, you talked about the offensive line. How then there's a bunch of them are transfers. How do you think they'll come together and help Ole Miss this year?
That's another good question, to be honest with you. Now, yes, Ole Miss has a couple returners again this year, a couple guys transferring in as well too. But I will bring this up right quick. Of course, now you have guys who can transfer like in December or January. Of course, you have guys who are transferring in after the spring or in the summer as well too. But we took care of the offensive line pretty quick. All the transfers coming in are all guys who announced back in December and January they're coming to Ole Miss. So, right now, just to be honest with you, I am kind of curious to see how this group does Saturday in the first couple of weeks. Just from a line group, it's kind of interesting. A bunch of these guys have experience at tackle. A bunch of these guys have experience at guard. Actually, kind of behind the scenes, this is a video coming out tomorrow. Are two guys competing for center. They both have some injury problems the past couple of weeks. There's a possibility Ole Miss maybe without both of those centers the first game of the season, and also maybe the first 2 to 3 games of the season. So that's going to be kind of something I'm curious about this Saturday. But yeah, some of these guys this offseason have been moved around to guard the tackle, or some guys move from tackle to guard. Bunch of guys trying new stuff this offseason. And of course, one thing we've heard Coach Kiffin talk about a lot this offseason as well too, or a lot in recent weeks. Coach Kiffin has talked a lot about the defensive line dominating in the practices and also in the scrimmages as well too. Now, I do believe there's a possibility this could be the best defensive line group this offensive line faces all year. Of course, you could also put Georgia in that conversation as well too. But I am kind of curious to see how this offensive line group can do against competition that's easier.
Yeah. And moving to recruiting, y'all, Ole Miss has been getting some top talent. How do you feel about the recruiting right now for Ole Miss?
I like our recruiting class. I really do. I mean, there's still a couple big-time prospects announcing pretty soon. The first guy I kind of think of announcing here next month is going to be 4-star safety with Darian Carty. He's the guy many Ole Miss fans are kind of feeling pretty confident we can land. There's going to be some other guys who may announce pretty soon. There'll be some guys who will be taking their time and won't announce until November or December. But, right now I don't have the stats here in front of me, but I believe our recruiting class is around like 25th in the country, at maybe 30th. It's in that area somewhere. But there's a couple guys I really do like. There's a couple guys who I believe could be key role players within a couple years. So I mean, there's a couple of guys I really do like, and there's a couple of guys who I believe really could be special here at Ole Miss.
Yeah, so it's game one. Um, how do you think Ole Miss matches up with Furman this week?
So Furman, this is a video that actually came out today. I don't know if you saw it or not, Kobe, but uh, this is kind of an interesting thing I brought up in the video. Furman's a team who's also played against some other pretty good teams within the last couple of years. Now, last year they played at South Carolina. At the end of the first quarter, it was still 7-7. Also, at one point in the game, it was 14-14. After halftime, different story. South Carolina won the game by like 25 points. This is also a team that played at Clemson a couple years ago. That game was kind of similar as well too. Clemson won the game by like 23, but the game was very close there for a while. They played at NC State 3-4 years ago, I believe. That game kind of similar as well too. NC State didn't have the best start, but after halftime, different story. They even played at Virginia Tech like 5 years ago. Virginia Tech only won that game by 7 points. So this is a team who is played good against good competition, or they've had some good. I put it to you like this: they've had some good starts against good competition, and this is also a point I brought up in today's video as well too. I was talking to a guy a while back who played at Louisiana Monroe. He played wide receiver, played special teams as well too, and had a very good career there at Louisiana Monroe. He was a guy who also went to the NFL. He was a guy who was with the Eagles for a minute. He was with the Falcons for a minute. Played in Canada some as well too. But one thing he always told me was, he's like, Trent, teams like us are not on TV every week. Teams like us don't play SEC opponents every week. And of course, a bunch of those juniors and seniors, most of those guys' dreams are to make it to the NFL. A bunch of those guys want to make it to the next level.
Mm.
The coaches and the scouts want to know, okay, what did you do against Ole Miss? What did you do against Clemson or NC State or Virginia Tech? Or they want to know, what did you do against the best competition? These games, like Ole Miss, for example, are the games they always circle on the calendar. These are the type of games they always look forward to. So I do believe they will come in with a chip on their shoulder Saturday. Possibility they can make things interesting at first. But they're a team. I do believe they'll be ready for this environment. They're used. I mean, they're used to the noise. I mean, once again, this is a team who played at South Carolina last year. They played at Clemson. They played at Virginia Tech. They played at NC State. This is the team, and a lot of players have played in front of 60,000 and 70,000 plus fans. So I do believe they'll be ready for sure. But then it could be all Ole Miss after the second quarter. So
Yeah, you if you look at the wide receiver room, bringing a lot of guys back. And I think this wide receiver group can be the one in the top in the country. How do you think this wide receiver group is gonna do this year?
So yeah, Ole Miss has a couple returners back again this year. Couple younger guys who are going to be sophomores this year. Ole Miss is kind of hoping they can step up. But yeah, you look at this Ole Miss wide receiver room. Of course, Trey Harris is back again this year. I mean, last year he was a guy who was 15 yards short of 1,000 yards. But you also have to remember last year he missed, I think it was 3 games, I believe. And if he was healthy all season, Trey Harris was a guy who could possibly have 1,200 yards, maybe 1,300 yards. Last year, I think he had like 8 touchdowns. He's the guy who could have had maybe 12 touchdowns, could have maybe had 13 plus. But he's in for a special season. I do believe Trey Harris should be one of the best receivers in the SEC this year, and also should be one of the best in the country as well too. Of course, Jordan Watkins back again this year. He's been at Ole Miss for a couple years now. Very good wide receiver. Last year, he had about 50 catches, had around 700 yards, had 4 or 5 touchdowns as well, too, I believe. But he's back again this year. Juice Wells, transferring in from South Carolina, he was a very good receiver for a couple years. Back in 2021, back even in 2022, did some incredible things. This past season, had some injury problems, didn't really play much. I think he only had like 3 or 4 catches the whole entire season. I think he only played in like 2 games the whole year, might have been 3 games, but that was kind of one question we've had for a while is, okay, is he going to be healthy this year? Is Juice Wells going to be 100%? Is he going to be his old self again? And we haven't really seen much film. We've heard some from media, we've heard some from coaches of what's kind of going on some, but from what's being reported and from what we've heard, it looks like he's been doing pretty good the last couple of weeks. But we're definitely hoping he's in for a special season as well too. And then as far as the backups, Ole Miss has Deion Smith transferring in from LSU. Deion Smith's a kid he's actually from Mississippi. Back in high school, he was like a top 60, top 70 recruit. Everybody wanted them. Ole Miss wanted them, State wanted them, LSU, Alabama. I mean, several teams wanted Deion Smith, but he went to LSU. But now he is back here at Ole Miss. But right now he is still not clear to play. He's not been practicing any this offseason, which is disappointing to his Ole Miss fans. We're kind of hoping he can get cleared up pretty soon. But we don't really have an update. We don't really know when he'll be playing for Ole Miss this year. I mean, once again, because of course, as Ole Miss fans are hoping he'll play, week 1 or week 2, or we're hoping he'll be back pretty soon. But there's also that possibility he may not play until sometime the end of the season. We just don't know. There's a bunch of question marks at him. But your other receivers, last year we had a couple pretty good freshmen, Caden Wee and also Aiden Williams. Those 2 guys were freshmen last year, and they didn't get much playing time. They did play some here and there. But Caden Wee was a guy who had a couple catches last year, had a couple catches, had a couple of touchdowns. He showed some pretty good flashes for sure last year. And then from what we've heard this offseason, we have heard he has improved and looked pretty good. So looking like he'll be one of the backup receivers. Aiden Williams is also a guy from Mississippi. Even back when he was in high school, top 100 recruit, top 100, top 150. I forgot what he was now. But, of course, Ole Miss, one of them, Mississippi State wanted Aiden Williams. Almost everybody wanted Aiden Williams, but he came to Ole Miss, and last year was a true freshman. Didn't play much. Did play some here and there, but we're kind of hoping he's going to be the other receiver who will step up this year for Ole Miss. But yeah, I mean, Ole Miss has some pretty good wide receivers. Ole Miss has a couple good tight ends as well, too. Of course, Caden Prescorn back again this year. You have the Quan Wright from Virginia Tech transferring in. Hudson Wolf is a guy who's been at Ole Miss forever. He's just had a bunch of injury problems. Just a guy who just can't catch a break. But this Ole Miss receiver room should be pretty good this year.
Yeah. What do you think about the secondary?
So yeah, the secondary. Ole Miss has a couple returners back again this year, a couple of transfers in as well too. So Trey Washington is back again. He's back again this year at Ole Miss. He's a guy who's been one of our best defense players the last couple of years. He's a guy, even this past season, I think he had like 80 plus tackles, had some interceptions, has been a very good football player in the secondary the last couple of years. But he'll be a starter this year. You do have Trey Amos. He's a transfer from Alabama, transferring in. It's looking like he'll be your best corner this year. He'll be a starter. Isaiah Hamilton, he's a guy from Houston. He's done pretty good in his college career. Looking like he'll be our second best corner this year. And as far as your other safety position and even the other corner positions as well too. It's kind of interesting. A couple of guys battling it out. So it's kind of looking like Trey Washington probably going to be your starting strong safety. And then as far as free safety, I would probably say John Saunders Jr. He was here with us last year, did pretty good. You have a couple of transfers coming in. Key Lawrence from Oklahoma, he's here at Ole Miss this year. You have Yam Banks from South Alabama. He's here at Ole Miss this year. Brandon Turnage is actually a guy from Oxford, but out of high school, he didn't come to Ole Miss, but he's back here at Ole Miss now. But he's a guy who should get a lot of playing time this year at Ole Miss. Lewis Moore is kind of another interesting name as well too. He's a guy from Indiana, has been a very special player up there. There's a possibility he could start maybe they're at nickel, maybe at free safety. He's a guy who could be moved around some. But this secondary, I mean, Ole Miss has plenty of options. We have some good starters, have some good backups. This is going to be a pretty good secondary this year, in my opinion.
Yeah. Did you watch Lane Kiffin's press conference?
You talking about today's press conference?
Yeah, today.
Yeah, I watched. I seen part of it. To be honest with you, I didn't watch the whole press conference. But
at your time watching it, what did you hear him talk about? That's like about the season. And what did you take away from it? The part of you that you saw.
I mean, Lane Kiffin's a guy who doesn't really say much. I mean, he's a guy who's just not going to talk about injuries. He's not going to really talk about the game plan. There's just some things he's just not going to talk about. One thing he did bring up today was Ole Miss plans on running the ball a lot this Saturday, is something he said. And I did kind of see both sides of it. Of course, I mean, I think Ole Miss knows what we have at wide receiver, running back, looking like you saw us do with the 4. Should be your starter at running back, looking like Kenyon Parrish Jr. probably going to be the backup. Rashawn Amos is actually a guy who announced he was going to Mississippi State, changed his mind. He's now here at Ole Miss, but looking like he'll be third string this year. So Ole Miss does not have Logan Diggs right now. He's injured. It looks like, well, there's a possibility, a couple different things with him. He could be back week 4 or week 5, it looks like. But then also, this is a guy this year who is supposed to be a senior. Some people are kind of thinking possibility Ole Miss may just save him maybe for the playoffs for the last couple of games of the season. So we can save him from next year. That's what some fans were kind of thinking. But yeah, apparently Ole Miss is going to run the ball a lot this weekend. If I'm taking a guess, that could be maybe 60%, maybe 65%, maybe even more. I don't really know, to be honest with you. And one thing I brought up in today's video was, well, I kind of touched on it some, but Furman's a team. They lost their starting quarterback. They lost their starting running back. They lost 4 offensive linemen. They lost 6 guys in the secondary. They lost some seniors, had some guys transferred out. There's a couple of guys this year who's injured and going to miss a good part of the season. Their secondary is in very bad shape. So I could see Ole Miss taking advantage of their secondary for sure this Saturday. But it kind of looks like maybe Kiffin just kind of wants to see what we have at running back. And I'm going to try a bunch of those guys out Saturday.
Yeah, one more question. The only position I hadn't mentioned was middle linebacker. How can a middle linebacker be this year with Chris Paul Jr. and company?
So yeah, our linebacker room, I do believe, will be another very special group at Ole Miss this year. Of course, Ole Miss has a couple of transfers, a couple of returners. But as far as our linebacker room, it's it's kind of pretty much down to 4 guys as far as guys who are going to get the most amount of playing time this year, or starters or key backups. I guess is kind of how you word it. So for Ole Miss, uh, of course, you mentioned Chris Paul Jr. He's a guy from Arkansas, has been a very good linebacker for the Razorbacks the last couple of years. He's a guy who's had like 70, 80 plus tackles the last couple of years. Very good linebacker, very athletic, very good speed, good awareness, very good, tough tackling linebacker. So he's a guy Ole Miss fans are very high on for sure. This year, you have Kawhi Coleman back again this year as well too. He's a guy who's been at Ole Miss for a couple of years. Um, he's a guy, kind of interesting guy. He may start, maybe a backup, but either way, he's going to be a guy who will get a lot of playing time this year at Ole Miss. Um, you could also mention a couple more guys as well too. T.J. Daugherty, he's a guy from Clemson, played in a couple games last year. He's a guy who's had a very good off season, and there's a possibility he could start at Ole Miss this year. If he's not starting, he'll be a key backup for sure.
Yeah.
And then the guy, actually 2 more guys you can mention. So once again, Sunderland Perkins, very athletic guy. He'll play some defensive line and also play some linebacker at Ole Miss this year, but he'll be a guy used in many ways at Ole Miss this year. Raymond Collins is kind of an interesting one. He's a junior college transfer from Jones Community College. He's a guy who will be in the rotation some this year. He's a guy who may not appear in every game, but I do believe he'll get a decent amount of playing time at Ole Miss this year for sure.
Well, man, that's all the questions I have for you, brother. Thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate the invite. Really do.
Yes, sir. Talk to you later, man.
Sounds good. See ya.
See ya.